Hey everybody, this is the Freakopolis Times, our podcast, mostly about stuff related to our comics and game shop, the Freakopolis Geekery. We're Ian, Tyler, and Troy, and we run the shop and host this podcast. Join us and some occasional guests as we talk comics, games, pop culture, and just about anything else that pops up. Remember, while some of our topics can get a little geeky, they change up often, so hang in there and maybe the next one will be more your style. By the way, this podcast is video enhanced on YouTube and Spotify. Check it out if you're feeling left out on the visuals. You never know what might show up. Now, let's do the show.
Here we are, episode 1.
Live with episode 1, live recording it. Yeah.
Dang. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has. It's good to finally be in the hot seat.
I guess so. We've been holding back on a podcast for 5.5, almost 6 years, knowing that we should probably do a podcast, and now we're finally doing it, and this is episode 1.
I think, we got the letter in the mail. It said, "Hey, dingbats, every store needs a podcast." And so, here we are.
We got the green light.
We did. We had to submit the application.
Mm-hmm.
Went through a thorough vetting process, and finally, here we are with episode 1.
Yeah, went through a vetting process, found the 3 people we wanted to have do this podcast.
Yeah. It was a difficult selection. Really. I remember the interview. I was sweating the whole time.
Oh my gosh. Mine went horribly.
Did it?
Oh yeah.
How'd you end up here?
Skin of my teeth.
Not by merit,
No.
apparently. So, we're going to pry into the depths of our hearts and souls here and tear ourselves open for our worthy listeners, our many varied, viewpointed...
I did not sign up for that.
It was in the interview.
I did not sign up for that. Okay, there was an interview. Okay.
So
where are you going with this?
All right, allow me to psychologically torment you then with some quick questions that I think will give people some insight into who we, the runners of Freakopolis, are.
Okay.
So let's kick it off with like an easy one. We're big fans of tabletop RPGs. We love Dungeons & Dragons, of course. We make it widely known, but that's not the only system that we've enjoyed or checked out. What RPG systems are our favorites?
Oof.
Yeah, there's a lot to go on about in the world of RPGs, the wide world of it all. And that includes Savage Worlds.
Oh yeah, Savage Worlds been around for a long time and is always a great go-to whenever you're playing something that isn't fantasy.
Yes.
It fits in really well there. Except maybe superheroes. I still question whether or not it's a perfect system for superheroes.
You pine for the days of Champions weekly to me, Dad.
That's true.
Oh yeah, Hero Games Champions is still to me a great example of a superhero RPG that really worked and understood superheroes, and you could do true spandex 4-color heroes.
I think that Savage Worlds' hero adaptation, their guidebook, is suitable, though it requires a little bit of interpretation on some of the specific rules. And that's just because superheroes are so hard to nail down.
Yeah, and even as a player, even once you get a game of soups going, it's a lot to have to pull off.
You know what really breaks the whole thing? Speedsters.
It always comes down to those dang speedsters.
It does.
Well, I mean, in some systems it does, and some systems are designed to work with it. That's one of the things that we felt Hero Games Champions handled really well. It handled speedsters well. So that was one of the things where we said, hey, this kind of works. You know, we can use this.
How exactly did that work?
Well, basically, time was broken. A round of combat was broken down into 12 segments, and everybody acted in some of those 12 segments. if you had a speed of 3, then you acted on segments 4, 8, and 12. You would have to have a speed of 12 in order to act in segment 1.
Right.
Everything skipped segment 1 and started at 2 at the earliest, unless you had a speed of 12.
So that does pretty well represent a speedster's power, because they can take a ton of actions in a single round.
Right, so they'd have 12 full actions, plus then on top of that they could have movement benefits.
Right.
So you could pull off a speedster pretty well in that game.
But in Savage Worlds, and in a lot of tabletop RPGs, the action economy is a big part of it. Only being able to make one move, one attack, one bonus action, that kind of stuff. And being able to add even one more of those abilities is a huge change to the character.
Like doubles your damage potential,
Yeah.
doubles your healing potential, doubles all that.
Yeah, I mean,
real.
we've seen characters that were built on the speedster kind of concept in Champions that really didn't do much more than, sort of regular fist damage, but could do it so frequently that they could pound people down.
Yeah, that's the balancer, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
So it really felt kind of like The Flash or something like that.
Yeah. Whereas in Savage Worlds has an action economy of what, Tyler? You play quite a bit.
You've got actions, and free actions, and movement.
Right, so being able to stretch that out and provide a speedster a bunch of extra actions can quickly get out of hand.
Oh yeah, easily. I mean, you become like 4 characters in one when you're able to do 4 characters' actions,
Maybe in a future episode we'll talk about the new Marvel
That's what I was gonna say.
superhero playtest book that's out. But we'll hold that back so that we can talk about some more things in this episode. But
I've flipped through it once or twice, and it looks promising.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see how it tackles those soups challenges.
You know what Savage Worlds is really fantastic for, though, of course? Their taglines are fast, furious, fun, and so that lends towards comic booky, pulpy sorts of settings. And Tyler, you run a Deadlands setting that has been long going, and you put a lot of effort into that week by week. How do you think Savage Worlds handles Deadlands?
I think originally I think Savage Worlds derived from Deadlands.
I believe so, right? Yeah, that's the case for Pinnacle.
So it'd be a little sacrilegious to say if it didn't do it justice. And I think it does. The whole fear mechanics that Savage Worlds brings along.
Yeah.
All the edges are super cool and lend themselves to Deadlands a lot. They fought a den of werewolves in my last session.
Exactly, yeah.
And that pulpy sort of, fast, furious fun really lends itself to Savage Worlds and
does.
Deadlands. It pulls it off.
The action cards and stuff are the coolest aspect, in my opinion, allowing the players to put their hand into the narrative out of nowhere and make a huge difference in the scene. And Savage Worlds isn't the only tabletop role-playing system that kind of lends into that aspect. Dad, you've read through Fate about 50 times, though you have never actually run or played Fate.
Right, sure. Well, I think that's another one where it kind of bends the genre of role-playing. It has a different intent in how you play it and how you sort of operate your character in the world. It's very language-based. It's very description-based. It's probably the one that is designed the most for cooperative storytelling. And that's strictly its aim, is it building a cooperative story. The dice rolls are nowhere near as important as the adjectives used to describe them. So, it's so far outside the norms of what I know for playing role-playing games that I haven't quite found the right game or campaign to use it based on that.
Sure, and like the Powered by the Apocalypse system is also rather similar in that it's very narratively focused and the dice are used rather sparingly. And I suppose when it comes to tabletop RPGs, you have this spectrum, right? You have on one end the mechanically heavy, crunchy systems, which honestly, though D&D 5e is rather light and easy to understand in some regards, it is vastly focused in on combat. and combat effects, and so it can get kind of crunchy. And I think it leans more towards the mechanical aspect, though there's all sorts of narrative potential if your DM is putting in the effort, for sure.
Of course, I do agree it's on that side of the spectrum, though, for sure.
Whereas Savage Worlds might sit a bit in the middle, where things can kind of happen out of nowhere, and as you lean more towards the narratively strong end of the tabletop RPG spectrum and depart from the mechanical spectrum, you start giving more power to the players to impact the story. And that's the adventure cards or aspects in Fate, that kind of stuff. And I think that those systems can be super fun with the right group.
Absolutely, and it definitely takes some getting used to. I think the group I've been running Deadlands for on Tuesday nights is a lot more confident in their abilities to play adventure cards and use bennies in ways that influence the story. And sort of let them bring their voice to what I have to do, which definitely means an extra layer of
improv,
which can be difficult to pull off online, because you really have to have stuff ready, some plans that might not even see the light of day for the players. But
only so many maps you can make in 1 week.
Exactly, so you never really know. But I'm glad you brought up Powered by the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Because I do enjoy their sort of flexible game system.
I think the strongest part of that system is the way they handle experience points, where essentially your character has a checklist of things that they should try and do throughout a session in order to fulfill their narrative destiny. Like if you're playing a rogue in some Powered by the Apocalypse, it's a very diverse system, but if you're playing a rogue, it might say, like, did you drag your party into mischief this session? Then get an experience point, you know? that causes you to approach things from a more narratively strong angle instead of just, well, I need 700 gold to buy a +1 suit of chainmail, which will increase my AC by this much, so we should definitely hunt down those goblins, right, guys? You know, it's a different experience, and I think that they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but I just love talking about them, so
they're awesome.
Yeah. Next up on my list of quick questions is, let's go into the realm of comic books. Because, of course, Freakopolis is not only a game store, we are proud to be a comic book store as well. It's a realm that is filled with all manner of awesome ideas and stories. That's important to us. But the king of comics is Marvel. And I wanted to know, what does Marvel mean to us? What's our history with the franchise and our thoughts about its future? And Dad, I mean, you have about 3 times as much years experience with Marvel than we do, so what does Marvel look like to you? What do you remember it as?
Well, I mean, I think Marvel has always been the comic company that publishes sort of the most polished and cohesive universe of superheroes. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of always been that way. I remember I think I started reading comics when I was around 15. And Marvel always stood out of the racks at the comic shops as being the one that, sort of understood the entire realm of its own universe, and you would see characters crossing over between titles and all of that. So, I guess even in comparison to today, it's still doing that same thing.
It is, yeah.
It sort of shares its intellectual property really well with itself.
Do you remember the first comic shop you went to?
No.
Well, they aren't all cool places. Yeah.
I mean, it was fine.
Sure. They had a selection of comic books.
Yeah. I don't remember ever having any kind of a relationship with them or anything like that. I didn't know the people keeping the shop or any of that. It was, sort of go in, get your comics, get out.
Sure. However, Marvel, for Tyler and I, we've talked it over, and it's a bit different. Really, our introduction to Marvel was Iron Man, the movie, in 2007, I think?
I believe so, yeah.
So I was like 11 years old.
I was 6.
Yeah.
So it was amazing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that movie, Iron Man 1 still holds up well today. The way that it brought this whole new world into our minds, and we were familiar, we knew about the Mighty Thor, we knew about the X-Men,
yeah.
there was
Of course.
X-Men 80s cartoon was still doing reruns when I was a kid, you know. I was familiar with these characters in a big way, but Iron Man made it seem like now these characters are like a pantheon, you know? Mm-hmm. Here we have our gods, and they are awesome.
And Robert Downey Jr.'s spear fronting it.
Yeah,
kicking it all off, and
such a charismatic role that he managed to pull off there, like nothing else. I don't know, it's still kind of unmatched.
For real.
But after that, you know, you start to think, well, all these stories gotta come from somewhere, right? And the intro, of course, with all the flipping comic books should lead you to know that the place to find the origin of all these movies and these ongoing series and stuff today is from books that came out about, 40, 50 years ago. And that's a crazy revelation if you were only really familiar with the MCU. Mm-hmm. Because you can kind of predict the future now. Thor Love and Thunder is taking from series that came out while we were open as a comic book store. We sold those issues of Thor. Mm-hmm. Now that's being adapted into a movie. And that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely cool to think about how things have progressed. I'm super excited to see where they go next. The future of it is ripe with opportunity, with Doctor Strange and all the rest of the Avengers still going strong.
True enough, but I don't know if anything will ever culminate into such the event that Endgame was. I don't know if you can build that kind of momentum again. Disney Plus has a bunch of great miniseries and stuff, but to have, 23 movies culminate into a single event is unheard of, and I don't think it can be recaptured.
Yeah. I mean, you got to collect up all of those celebrities, mm-hmm. And many of them are aging out of their roles. So like you'd have to get an entire new batch of celebrities,
superheroes. Yeah.
That you're going to use that. And maybe they'll just start making them with AI. And,
exactly.
True enough.
They'll all be computer-generated characters and AI stories.
Thor loses hammer to Kraken.
Right, that sort of thing.
Summoned by Scarlet Witch. It's just a noun roller, essentially. Yeah, it could very well happen. I think that it's a more in question future now, because it would be really hard to string together such a big Phase 3 or whatever they want to do. Phase 4, I don't even remember where we're at the moment. Even though all the productions are still quality, feels like a more disjointed experience now. And so I'm glad for the comic books, because there's the future, the strength of it all can be found right there. Mm-hmm. What about The Boys Season 3, huh? God!
Oh my goodness!
My God! Oh!
Yeah, so The Boys Season 3 is out now. We decided, I think there's 3 episodes available right now on Amazon. We watched the first episode from Season 3 last night.
Oh my God!
I mean, just so crazy, so gritty, so Garth Ennis.
Yes.
It's what a remarkable view on superheroes they've got going on.
That's the big strength. This is a new take for sure on superheroes, but the violence, the gore of it, and some of the cringiest situations that make you just shrink back into your seat, like, no!
Yeah. Oh, please don't.
Yeah.
I think there are moments when we all had our eyes covered.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen.
No, it speaks to how far they're willing to go, for sure, but I think there is a narrative strength behind this story.
Well, there's certainly an argument, I guess, in their world, that's the elite, right? Mm-hmm. The superheroes are the elite, and with the elite being overly self-indulgent.
Mm-hmm.
And you see a lot of that in there. And, it's clearly meant to be reflective of the elite in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all a metaphor, yeah.
And the, bizarre, crazy self-indulgence, the stuff we can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm. All the stuff that gets covered up.
Yeah, absolutely. They're tapping into that, for sure. But the presentation of it, those guys come up with some original scenarios to make their audience absolutely...
Shudder.
Unable to handle what they're looking at. It's wild. I don't think any other show has pushed visual aspects of cringiness to the forefront. Yeah.
And I think it was after such a break from season 2 to season 3, I think we got soft.
Yeah.
We kind of forgot what The Boys was all about, and to bring it back in such a fashion with episode 1 of season 3.
They punch you right in the face with it, for sure. You know what's funny, though? Volume 1 of that book, not very good.
No, I flipped through it because I watched The Boys and wasn't... I liked the TV show more.
The art style, not killing it. The narrative, too. I mean, some of the dialogue and stuff throughout the first volume is really not the best, but... it does, of course, lead into a story that's very much so worth reading. Maybe just pick it up at Volume 2. Get yourself a recap.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Volume 1, it sets up the details.
It does. It's just rough around the edges.
Yeah,
Same with, like, Invincible. Mm-hmm. There's just some, the first 6 issues, they didn't have the right artists. They didn't quite have themselves rolling with the narrative and whatnot, but once it does start going, of course, it's the inspiration for some of the biggest stuff out there right now. But yeah, it can be funny to see that there's the seldom adaptation that actually manages to kick things off right, even when they have a rocky get-go to base it off of.
And, of course, we have The Boys Volume 1.
We do, in fact, yes, yeah. If you want to get in on that cringiness, then feel free to grab Volume 1, I believe it's Herogasm, from the shop. Order that right up if you feel like it. No, not to talk down about it. It's a good book, for sure, but it's...
we were talking earlier, Homelander, the actor that plays Homelander, he does such an amazing job of just being disturbingly psychopathic, menacing,
unhinged.
And yet when he smiles at the camera, when he has to turn on the smile, he looks so charming. You can see where, the photographers are getting a nice picture of the great hero that Homelander is.
Yeah.
But behind those eyes, boy, he is... he's something.
That might be one of the greatest aspects of the show is how they sell the superheroes in that universe as being portrayed as heroes in the way that we would approach, like, the Avengers if they were real, you know? Like, the kids have birthday cakes with Homelander on them and stuff, giving the thumbs up and saying happy birthday, but you know the truth behind it all, that these are monsters and villains, to say the least, yeah.
And that's why, after a year being straight edge, the boys just can't let it go.
No, right? Yeah, they're back at it in style. They can't keep that on their consciousness, so they're going to start taking care of business, and I'm excited to see where season 3 goes.
The first episode was crazy.
Yeah.
We won't do spoilers just yet. We'll let people have time to watch some of this, but yeah, it's it picks right up from where it left off.
Carl Urban too. Holy moly!
Oh,
yeah,
he matches Homelander.
He does. Yeah, Butcher's a pretty
well.
awesome character, and Carl Urban manages to sell that role pretty great.
Okay, guys, so in a week of huge releases that we had around the shop, that we've talked about before, and we talk about in our live stream, but what did you guys see in the shop this week? What was the coolest thing you saw in the shop? Whether it was a pull, a set, something a guest or a customer opened.
There was so much this week.
Exactly.
I think that is a tough question to answer.
Tyler, you actually played in the Disney Plus draft to kick off the release of the new Disney Plus HeroClix set. And there were some wild pieces pulled in that draft.
There was literally hundreds of dollars in clicks on the table.
Yeah, we opened one brick, not even a full brick in that one, and
easily $250 in HeroClix.
Oh, easily.
Hitting the table, yeah. But, I mean, just in monetary value alone, that's pretty awesome. But the sculpts of them, too, were really fantastic. There was a killer Iron Man.
Sicarian Iron Man. Yeah.
Which
had all these tubes going in and out of his back, and just, the sculpt of it, the huge Iron Man body that it had.
It also had a distinct base, being a chase piece. It had a light blue, almost translucent base, a really cool effect going on there. And then there was... So we thought that was the big pull because it had a limited edition stamp on it, of course, a copper stamp for rarity, but then there was also a Vision, right?
Yes, there was an absolutely insane Vision that was pulled. I think it was 300, 200, or 100 points.
Wow!
And, $130 or something was what it was going for. And of course, What If only just came out, so who knows how those numbers will change.
For sure. That thing was a super rare prime as far as rarity is concerned. So immediately hitting the board were some of the highest tier rarity HeroClix there are out there.
Some of the highest we've ever seen pulled.
Yeah. But you went up against that Vision.
I did, and I would not want to again.
What did it have to throw down with?
All its abilities were insane, and of course he was playing it at its highest click value, which meant it had literally 11 out of the 12 clicks to work with. And each of its abilities were crazy.
I think it was incredibly evasive, right?
Yeah, it had phasing teleport, and after you use it, you'd get a flurry for free. So you make 2 attacks.
So mega charge,
And a shape change, so before you can even hit him, he rolls a d6 on a 5 or 6, he ignores the attack, and heals a click. So it was just...
Taking that thing down would be nigh impossible.
It was all I could do to slow it down till the time ran out and hope I had more points on the board.
For real. So that draft was quite the event, and seeing some of those pulls was particularly awesome. But then, moving towards our pre-release event for Baldur's Gate on Friday, Battle for Baldur's Gate, the new Magic the Gathering Commander-specific release, that was probably the funnest Magic the Gathering event we've had in a while. That was really awesome.
And there were some crazy pulls in there, too. I mean, some of the pulls that you would definitely want to get, like that Minsk and Boo promo card.
Yeah. One of our good customers got that as a promo stamped, the 2022 pre-release Magic promo stamp. So that's what he got in his pre-release pack, which, I mean, who isn't a fan of Minsk and Boo these days?
Yeah, well, they're sort of the cover figures for the whole set. So
they're the ones who get their comic books and stuff too,
So, it's perfect for that, and that pull was ideal. It's just what you would want to get.
Yeah, totally. And the Ancient Dragons, of course. You got a full art Ancient Gold Dragon.
Yeah, and that was in, I think, my first pack that I opened. So that sort of solidified what sort of deck I was going to make.
Yeah, that is too cool. But also, inside of this set, I think it really shook up the format in a huge way, because there is the backgrounds now.
Yes.
Which are going to unlock so many different builds for Commander, because now, digging into Baldur's Gate, there's a ton of legendary creatures worthy to be your Commander's applicable choices, but some of them have choose a background, and if they have that ability, then you can take one of the legendary background enchantments of any color and stick that in your command zone as well, which means that you might have a Golgari green-black elf commander that has choose your background, and you're going to make it a Sword Coast Sailor. So now your commander is a Sword Coast Sailor, and you can throw blue cards into your deck as well, because it's part of your deck's color identity.
Which is huge.
It is. I think that's awesome. I think that was one of the coolest ways, because Wizards has been a little hands-off about Commander. Sure, they've made some cards that are good for Commander, but this set was for Commander.
Oh, yeah.
And that's awesome, I think.
And that works well for our shop, because it seems like, for the most part, our shop is kind of turned toward Commander as the favored way to play Magic the Gathering.
It is the favored format, for sure. And I think that's for good reason. Standard can be fun. But it is definitely a battle of moolah.
Yeah, it's competitive, and it lends itself to having the deck that will win you the most times.
Yeah, totally.
Whereas Commander, you can pull from your entire collection, pretty much, and have some fun with it.
Yeah, the deck building aspect is a ton of fun, and then the game themselves are competitive to a degree. Of course, everyone wants to win.
Oh, yeah.
But it has a certain balancing mechanic in that if you start to fall behind, then everyone has at least 2 other opponents that they gotta focus on before they finish you off. Unless you're playing a particularly competitive or cruel match where someone wants you gone. But that doesn't tend to be the case. It really is, well, you're in the strongest position, so now I'm gonna have to hit you, and it trades around naturally, and I think that makes for a format where everyone gets to have fun and tries to actually play the game.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, while it's not a cooperative format, it lends itself well to players that are in a cooperative spirit.
Yeah.
And just looking to see how the decks play, how they play against each other, and in fact, it's favorable to keep other people in the game rather than just knock them out and have the fastest run possible game that you can have.
Yeah,
because it means you'll get to expose more of your deck, you'll get to work through deeper into your deck, and you'll be able to see what your own deck does.
Yeah.
Which sometimes you don't get to see if a game happens too rapidly.
The decks are also so big that you can play a commander deck 100 times and see a new hand to kick it off with every time, There's no way that you'll be certain as to what you're going to draw next, unless, of course, you're playing some tutors. But
there's cards I put in my deck weeks ago, and you still haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, that can happen, for sure.
One of these times, they're going to play.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it will be huge.
Yeah, having the chance to finally lay down that combo you've set up for a long time is a lot of fun, for sure, in Commander. And so, yeah, I think that it lends itself more towards our community and the way that we play. It sits well on the table for us. So that means that Baldur's Gate has been a big win, for sure.
So, let's talk a little bit about the comic club title that we're running right now. Our comic club at the Freakopolis Geekery is currently reading
Department of Truth. Volume 1, yeah.
From Image Comics.
Yeah.
Volume 1, which covers, I think, the first 5 or 6 issues.
Or 6, yeah, something like that.
It's a cool book.
It is. It made waves, for sure. And you can see why in the first few pages. That art style is striking.
Yep, and this is a sort of the concept is sort of neat and kind of very timely, has a lot to do with conspiracy theories. It's just a very interesting concept where pretty much for this detective, kind of an X-Files sort of detective, it's pretty much all the conspiracy theories are true.
Yes.
He uncovers them to be true.
Yeah, or at least the power of belief in conspiracy theories causes them to be true.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting rule for that world, for sure. You know what I noted, though, beyond the art, was as I was reading through it, at least the first issue or so, I'm still working my way for the upcoming comic book club meetup, but, Stephen King has this way of inviting you to places you've never been, but are familiar with, some very Americana-type stuff. Like, he won't describe just, shuffling past some items in a cupboard. It has to be a bunch of tennis rackets and tubes filled with tennis balls and stuff. And he just has a way of making you know these places and be very familiar with them. And in the beginning, towards the beginning of the Department of Truth anyway, our detective, our main protagonist, is making his way towards a Flat Earth Society meeting. And the narrative in the bubbles essentially says that he hadn't seen so many polo shirts in his life, and they stood around making Family Guy references and that kind of stuff. And it really was suddenly I can picture these types of people,
Right.
I'm familiar, even though I haven't really met anyone like that, I'm familiar with the archetype that they're talking about and referring to, and that really pulled me in from there on out. It feels like something you could sink your teeth into and really place your feet into,
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm not finished with the book yet. I'm looking forward to finishing it. And I'm looking forward to discussing it in our comic book club.
Totally.
Which happens on our Discord, by the way.
Yes.
So part of what we're trying to do, each podcast, we'd like to try and help make people's D&D games just a little bit better. We've got a lot of experience under our belts for D&D, and Ian is bringing some tips to the table, which we'll have a brief discussion about. So, Ian, what's this week's tip?
I think this week's tip is, of course, aiming more towards the player end of things. DMs, tune in only if you want to, because players, you've gotta know your character. It might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised by the amount of players who do not know what a guiding bolt does, even though it's been sitting on their spell list for 5 sessions straight.
And it's their own key ability.
Yeah. Or what exactly, how many health points do I have in my lay on hands? It's like, you should know this, my friend. And the point being that it's okay to ask those questions. Of course, a friendly group and a knowledgeable group will be more than willing to give you a hand with that kind of stuff. But the burden of the DM to bring the story, to bring the narrative, the characters, the mechanics, the encounters,
the descriptions, and
is 100 times more than the player just having to show up and sit at the table. So the least you could do is make it easy on them.
Yeah, ideally knowing your own character's capabilities will also make you more successful
in the strategy end of things.
Yeah. If you don't know about your own abilities, how can you possibly use them effectively?
Mm-hmm. It also lends to role-playing your character correctly. You have to know, what you're capable of, and what your limitations are, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that about your character, without having to ask these questions, even if they could be remedied in 5 seconds or less, with a knowledgeable group, means that you save everyone time and keep everyone immersed in the story that's going on. And I think that keeping that immersion and keeping the flow of the game going is super important to a good session.
Yeah, totally. And, everyone has questions eventually. Sometimes people want to upcast a spell in my Wednesday night campaign, and we have to look it up. It's like, can that spell be upcasted? I'm not entirely sure. Those types of pauses are totally fair just to keep things mechanically in the realm of fairness. However, to not know at all what a spell does, it's like, oh, this one looks cool. You really should maybe do just 5 minutes of studying up on your spell list. And it tends to be spell lists where this becomes the problem. And I understand if you don't have access to a player's handbook, then that can be a little bit of an issue. But in those moments when you do, transfer over a quick summary of what your spells can do.
Yeah, or sort of another tip here, even if you don't know your character, when it's not your turn, you should be planning your next move, and if you have any questions, try and answer them yourself. Either look them up, look up what the spell does online, or flip through your book. Do all that sort of things proactively.
Yes.
So that when it comes to your turn, you're not sitting there and asking questions.
Yeah, when it comes to your turn, that is not the moment to sit there and go, what should I do?
And that about does it for this one. If you liked hanging with us, please subscribe through your favorite podcast directory. Join our Discord and check out our shop, the Freakopolis Geekery. See you next time.